Turkey, a spokesperson for the U.S.-led coalition in Baghdad saying the U.S. heard Turkey's warnings to the Russian fighter pilot before Turkey fired on the Russian jet. But is it possible the Russian pilot could have missed the radio calls? Joining us, Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's also a former military pilot who flew in Iraq. Nice to see you, Congressman.
Hey, Greta. Good evening.
Good evening. Now, the warnings to this Russian jet were reported to be on open channels. Is there any way those Russian pilots wouldn't have heard that?
I suppose it's possible, but that's not an excuse for violating Russian or violating Turkish territory or anything like that. Typically, these calls will come on guard, which is 243.0 on UHF or 121.5 on VHF. There's other ways now with the deconfliction we have with the Russians that we can be able to talk back and forth. So the Russians, especially when you're flying near an enemy area like Turkey to the Russians, you would definitely be listening to guards. You would definitely be monitoring those call-outs. And so I got to tell you, the Russians really have no excuse for having violated Turkish territory multiple times over multiple weeks.
Is it proven that they actually violated the space? I know that Putin for some time, had said, at least earlier in the day, that it was in Syria. But is there proof? Has it been established?
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, we've seen the radar images where it looks like they did cross into Turkish territory. NATO said they, in fact, violated Turkish territory. NATO says that they were warned 10 times. I have no reason to not believe the Turks and NATO in this case instead of the Russians. I mean, keep in mind the Russians floated the idea that American fighter planes shot down, the airliner over the Ukraine. They have no interest in appearing in the wrong, but in this case, they're in the wrong. And think about this. For multiple years, we've been talking about the fact that Russians are violating American airspace, Turkish airspace. They've been playing with fire. You play with fire, you're going to get burned, and they got burned today.
What do you think Putin's thinking tonight?
Well, I think he's probably pretty embarrassed. I think he thought that he could push the limits of the Turks. I think in his mind, look, the Turkish allies are obviously closer to Turkey. Those are the enemies of Vladimir Putin because they're the enemies of Assad. And he got pretty arrogant. He's gotten that way after Ukraine, after Georgia, the occupancy there, and after Syria. So I think he's probably a little embarrassed. I agree with your previous guest that said he's probably going to retaliate. The ambassador will retaliate against the Turkmens. But look, violates Turkish territory again, you're going to get shot down again. I think that's something he knows and hopefully realizes. The other big thing is this. Look, the Russians are not as good as people give them credit for. They think they're somehow, the equivalent of the United States military. They're not.
Is this an escalation or just an incident?
I think it's an escalation. This is a thing that, we've been talking about for a long time. This is the thing that could escalate this beyond where we want to see it. I mean, the whole conflict is there anyway. It could be an incident if the Russians back off, but if they keep flying by Turkish territory, if they keep threatening the allies of freedom and the enemies of Assad, you could find another incident like this. We see that they parked a missile ship off of the coast. This could get pretty bad and pretty messy. It is important for Vladimir Putin to back off, put his ego aside, and do this for the safety of the region.
Congressman, thank you, sir.
You bet, Greta. Thanks.